My mom sent a voicemail. You're out of the family business. Expect a call from our lawyer. I didn't argue. I just replied, understood. Then I quietly sold my 40% share. 48 hours later, 72 missed calls, my brother begging me to undo it. Thank you for being here with me today. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are. ID love it. If you could share in the comments which city or country you're watching from and what time it is there. Now let's begin our story together. The notification popped up on my phone screen, a little red number above the voicemail icon. It was Mom. A wave of familiar tension washed over me, the kind that always seemed to accompany her calls, even now that I lived 2 states away and had built a life she barely seemed to acknowledge. I took a deep breath, telling myself it was probably just about the holidays, or maybe her asking me to look over some business papers. Again, I pressed play. Her voice, usually warm and bright, was clipped, formal, devoid of any preamble. Alex, she began, and the lack of honey or dear was the first jolt. Your father, your brother, and I have made a decision regarding the family business. We've decided to restructure, effective immediately. You're out of the family business. We've decided to buy out your share. Expect a call from our lawyer. The message ended. The silence that followed was absolute deafening in my quiet apartment. My hand trembled so hard the phone almost slipped through my fingers. A cold knot formed in my stomach, spreading like eyes through my chest. My chest tightened as if someone had wrapped barbed wire around my lungs. I stared at the wall, the carefully chosen paint color suddenly feeling distant and meaningless. The family business, the business I had bled for, sacrificed for, kept afloat more times than I could count. It wasn't just about the money. Although my 40% stake was significant, it was about everything that stake represented. It was my history, my connection, the last fragile thread binding me to a family that often felt more like a distant, demanding corporation than a source of love and support. My grandfather had started the business, a small manufacturing company built on sweat and a handshake. When he passed, had split it, giving Dad 40%, Mom 20%, and me 40%. My older brother, Mark, was still young then, just starting college, and Grandpa said my share was meant to be my foundation, my stake in the family's future, provided I was willing to work for it. I was. I plunged into it right after high school, learning the books, the operations, everything, while Mark went off to get a business degree he rarely seemed to use on the actual business side of things. Dad wasn't interested in the day-to-day. Mom took over the face of the company, handling clients and marketing, while Mark eventually slid into operations, charming everyone but rarely getting his hands dirty with details like inventory or, God forbid, payroll. That fell to me. Oh, Mom would always say, Alex handles the numbers. Bless his heart, he doesn't understand the real business. With a fond, dismissive wave of her hand, Mark would chuckle and add, yeah, Alex is our resident bean counter. Keeps the lights on. And I did. I kept the lights on when the market dipped and Mom and Mark had overspent on some flashy, unnecessary upgrade. It was my 40% stake that became the company's emergency fund. I delayed buying my first car. #ling the money into urgent supplier payments. I put off paying down my college loans, sending what I saved for a down payment on a house to cover payroll. During slow months, I cashed out investments I'd made with money from odd jobs as a kid just to make sure the company didn't default on a loan. My 40% share felt less like an asset and more like a permanent open vein for the business to draw from whenever it needed a transfusion. It felt like a chain wrapped around my future, pulling me back whenever I tried to move forward. I tolerated it because deep down, I craved their approval. I wanted them to see me not just as the guy who fixed the budget crisis, but as a vital, respected part of the family and the business. I poured money and hope into it, believing that one day they would see me not just as a piggy bank, but as a son, a brother, a partner. This was my blind spot, believing that blood ties meant unconditional loyalty and fairness, that my efforts had to count for something. In their eyes, eventually, every dollar I sent was a silent plea. Do you see me? Do you value me? Looking back, the signs were always there. Being left out of key strategy meetings that Mark, despite his lack of financial understanding, attended. Decisions made that directly impacted the company's finances, only for me to find out when the accounts didn't balance. Mom's casual dismissal of my suggestions, always with that condescending kindness. Mark always talking over me when business was discussed during family gatherings, physically excluding me from huddles with Dad or Mom. It wasn't just about the money. It was about being systematically cropped out of the picture like a forgotten face in an old photo album. The trust was eroding slowly, painfully, but I clung to the hope of belonging. Now the voicemail. You were out. The hope shattered. The ache for acceptance twisted into a cold, hard lump in my throat. It wasn't just painful. It felt like the ultimate betrayal of every sacrifice I had made. I didn't reply to the voicemail immediately. Couldn't. I just sat there. The sounds of my quiet apartment, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock amplifying the silence left by her words. It wasn't until the next day that I started to process it, the initial shock giving way to a confused hurt. Why now? What had I done? Then, 3 weeks later, the answer delivered via the most impersonal method imaginable. I was scrolling through Facebook, seeing the usual mix of vacation photos and baby pictures, when I saw a post on a local business group's page. It was a photo mom and Mark beaming, shaking hands with a man I didn't recognize. The caption announced a major new partnership for our family business, one that would propel us into a new era of growth. It felt like watching my own funeral announcement scroll by between vacation photos and baby pictures. They had signed a major deal bringing in a new partner, one that would undoubtedly impact the structure, finances, and future of the business in which I owned a significant stake. And I found out about it on social media. The betrayal wasn't just the voicemail. It was the utter disregard, the public humiliation of being treated as so irrelevant that they didn't even bother to inform me directly. I called Mom. She was dismissive. Oh, that. Yes, we meant to tell you. It all happened so fast. Fast. Mom, this is a major partnership. My percentage is affected by this. Why wasn't I involved? Why wasn't I even informed? Alex? She sighed. We didn't think you needed to be involved. You're not here every day. It was complicated business stuff. We handled it. The condescending kindness was back, but now it felt like a razor blade. Then Mark chimed in, his voice casual, arrogant. Yeah, man, you're just the money guy. Let us handle the real decisions. You wouldn't get it anyway. The words landed like physical blows. Just the money guy? The phrase that had always wrinkled now felt like the summation of their view of me. All my sacrifices, all my years of keeping them afloat, reduced to a simplistic, insulting label. The initial hurt twisted into a cold, hard anger. The blind spot, the hope for acceptance didn't just evaporate, it was violently ripped away. I saw them clearly now, not absent, minded or unintentionally hurtful, but deliberately excluding and disrespecting me for their own gain and convenience. After that conversation, I went quiet. They probably expected me to argue, to beg, to try and claw my way back in. That was the old Alex, the one desperate for their approval. But that Alex was gone. The voicemail followed by the Facebook discovery and their dismissive explanation had fundamentally changed something inside me. I was done bleeding for people who didn't see me as a partner, a brother, a son, but merely a resource to be tapped and discarded. They wanted me out, fine. I wouldn't fight their fight, the emotional, messy one I always lost. I would fight mine on my terms, using the very thing they thought toyed me. The numbers, the business logic, the understanding of finances they lacked. The strategic shift began immediately. I didn't yell, send on text. I picked up the phone and called a lawyer, a sharp business attorney I'd met through a contact years ago. I laid out the situation. My 40% ownership, my history of financial support, the new undisclosed partnership deal, the voicemail kicking me out, the threat of their lawyer. I also mentioned, almost as an afterthought, the extensive financial records I had kept over the years. Every transfer, every payment ID covered, every informal loan. My lawyer's interest peaked at the mention of the records. That's key, Alex. He said documentation changes everything. Over the next few days, I became a machine. I dug through old emails, bank statements, physical files I still had. I organized everything, creating a clear, undeniable timeline of my financial contributions and their reliance on me. I also started looking through the limited business reports I had been privy to, cross-referencing them with public filings, trying to understand the financial health of the business before this new deal. As I did, I started noticing discrepancy. Small things that didn't add up, hints of financial strain that went beyond market dips. It wasn't just mismanagement. It felt like something was being actively hidden, or had been for a while. This deepened the setup for the later twists. The feeling that their rush to get me out and bring in a new partner wasn't just about cutting me off, but about covering something up, perhaps tied to past issues ID uncowingly helped fix. With my documentation prepared and reviewed by my lawyer, the path forward became clear. They wanted to buy me out, fine. But they wouldn't dictate the price and they wouldn't control the narrative. My lawyer explained that forcing a buyout required specific legal processes. But selling my share to a third party was often simpler, especially if the operating agreement didn't explicitly forbid it. My lawyer had connections in the business world, including investors who specialized in acquiring stakes in privately held companies, sometimes those with complex family dynamics or undisclosed issues. We found an interested party or private equity group. They were shrewd, focused purely on the numbers and the potential. I presented my case backed by my meticulously organized financial records. I didn't badmouth my family, but I laid out the facts. My 40% ownership, my history of being the de facto financier, the new partnership deal I wasn't informed about, and my family's subsequent attempt to unilaterally remove me and buy me out below market value. My documentation hinted strongly at potential underlying financial issues beyond normal business challenges. The due diligence process by the investors' team was swift and thorough, much more so than my family likely ever expected or performed themselves. They looked at the official books, but also cross-referenced them with my independent records of money coming in and out to cover their shortfalls. My meticulous notes on specific past financial crises I had averted suddenly took on new significance. Then came the day of the sale. Sitting in the lawyer's sterile conference room, signing the papers felt surreal. There was no shouting, no grand declaration, just the scratching of my pen on paper, a sound barely audible, but shattering everything that had come before I sold my 40% stake. The feeling wasn't triumph, not yet. It was a heavy mix of sadness for the lost dream of a real family business, fear of the unknown reaction, and a grim satisfaction that I had taken control. I had accepted their premise but dictated the execution. My final act in the business was quiet, deliberate, and irreversible. After the papers were signed and the funds were securely in an escrow account managed by my lawyer, I sent a simple short email reply to my mom's original voicemail notification. Just one word. Understood. It was the quietest message carrying the loudest possible meaning. Then I waited. The next 48 hours were a tense, agonizing silence. I knew the investors' team would be making their presence known, contacting Mom and Mark to inform them of the change in ownership and to begin their deep dive into the company's financials. As the new 40% owner, I tried to go about my life, but I was constantly checking my phone, every notification sending a jolt of anxiety through me. The storm hit on the morning of the second day. My phone started ringing. Non-op Mom, the business line missed calls piled up. 10, 25, 50, 72. The screen was a constant flash of notifications. Text messages came flooding in. Initially confused, quickly turning frantic, then accusatory, and finally desperate. I finally answered a call from Mark. His voice, usually thick with self-importance, was thin, ready with panic. Alex, what did you do? You have to fix this. Please just undo it. Undo what? Mark? My voice was calm, almost unnaturally so. The sale, this investor. They've frozen everything they're asking for all the books, going over everything they said they found. They found problems. The revelation hit me sharp and clear. The investor's standard due diligence, fueled by the hints in my documentation and their own expertise, had immediately uncovered the extent of the financial mismanagement I had suspected. It wasn't just poor handling. It was significant enough for a new owner to halt operations and demand a full accounting. My strategic exit, combined with their own hidden practices, had exposed everything. The moment of justice, or at least reckoning, had begun. My quiet sale wasn't just me leaving. It was me pulling the pin on a grenade that didn't know I was holding. Loaded with evidence, they helped me pack over the years. Problems, I repeated, letting his panic hang in the air. That's their right, Mark. They own 40% now, just like I used to. But Mom said you were out. She sent the voicemail. We were going to buy you out. You said I was out. You said you didn't need me involved. You said I was just the money guy, and you handled the real decisions. I said, using their exact words, each phrase a deliberate quiet strike. I took you at your word. I'm out. You handle the real decisions now. Looks like the new partner is handling them too. His pleading turned to sputtering anger, but I didn't listen. I hung up the phone. The calls didn't stop immediately, but my responses became shorter, colder, handled mostly through my lawyer. Mom and Mark were in full damage control mode. initially trying to blame the investor, then trying to blame me, then descending into guilt trips. Their desperation was palpable, a stark contrast to their earlier arrogance. They faced severe consequences. The investor was now essentially in control with their stake and evidence of mismanagement. Legal battles were looming and the business was in jeopardy, potentially facing bankruptcy or forced sale under new terms. As the legal and financial fallout unfolded, the deeper truth behind the mismanagement started to surface. It wasn't just recent mistakes. My meticulously kept records combined with the investor's professional audit revealed a pattern of questionable financial decisions and hidden debts going back years, predating the new partner deal, but exacerbated by it. It turned out a significant past financial hole which I had unknowingly helped patch over with my own money years ago was deeper than I knew. Mom and Mark had been struggling to keep it hidden, desperately seeking a new partner to inject cash without revealing the full picture. The new partner was likely promised a cleaner financial slate than existed, and the investor's discovery blew that up. It wasn't just a failure to manage. It was a long-term deception partially obscured by my consistent financial bailouts. Perhaps this was even tied to the broken promise about my 40% shares future value. Maybe they always knew the business had these underlying issues and my stake wasn't worth what Grandpa intended or what they led me to believe. The source of the clear evidence, my documentation, the auditor's expertise, and perhaps even a quiet tip-off from a long-game employee who was loyal to me, or fed up with Mom and Mark's practices. An unexpected ally who saw the writing on the wall and knew my records were the key. The social ripple effect was painful, but also clarifying. Some relatives believed Mom and Mark's narrative of me being a cruel, greedy son who abandoned them. Others, particularly those who had seen my years of quiet support or heard whispers of the business troubles, offered hesitant support or simply stayed silent, distancing themselves from the drama. My true support network became clear. My lawyer, who was professional but also showed genuine concern, and friends outside the family who validated my feelings and actions. They reminded me that family isn't just blood. It's about respect, trust, and mutual care. They were my new definition of family. My healing journey was long and wasn't a straight line. The adrenaline faded, leaving behind a profound sadness. I grieved not just the loss of the business stake, but the loss of the idea of the family I had longed for. There were moments of anger, moments of doubt, but those were always countered by the memory of the voicemail, the Facebook photo marks, words, and the cold evidence of their deceit. I learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not fight for a place where you don't belong, but to protect yourself and walk away. I set firm boundaries. I didn't accept calls unless scheduled communication went through my lawyer, and I refused to discuss the business or the past. It was difficult, especially with Mom, but necessary for my own sanity and recovery. I had to accept that the relationship I wanted with them was impossible. The lessons are etched into me now. The vital importance of boundaries, even with family. The difference between obligation and healthy love. The power of self-respect and walking away from toxic situations. The strength found in truth and owning your story. I also learned that being the money guy wasn't a weakness or just a label. It was a skill that ultimately gave me the power to protect myself and expose the truth. I lost a business and maybe a certain idea of family. The scars remain reminders of the cost. My relationship with Mom and Mark is fractured, possibly beyond repair in any conventional sense. But I gained my freedom, my self-respect, and a clearer vision of who I am and who my true family is. The people who value me, not just what I can do for them. The weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying for decades suddenly lifted, leaving an ache, but also an incredible lightness. Signing those papers wasn't just ending a business connection. It was signing my own declaration of independence. It wasn't the ending I ever imagined for my family's story, but it was the beginning of mine. It was painful. It was messy. But looking back, standing here on my own ground, firm beneath my feet for the first time, I know I made the only choice I could. Sometimes the hardest boundaries you set are with the people you love the most. What would you have done?